All right, looks like we've got a quorum here, so we'll get started. My name is Chris Kane. I appreciate all of you making time to spend an hour with us here. We're going to use most of our time today to have a conversation with 6 companies who are finalists for Digiday's Best Publisher Platform Award. I'll introduce them all in just a moment. Some logistics first, then I'll set a little context for this discussion, and then we can really get into the details. First, 2 sort of logistical things that we're going to be doing throughout the session. Please use the Q&A window that's at the bottom of your screen throughout the discussion. I'll do my best to sort of keep an eye on that as the conversation moves along, and might feed in some questions as we go. We'll also leave a good amount of time at the end to field lots of questions from the audience. So please do use that Q&A window. Second, we're going to use polls here and there. And so I'd like to pull up one right now just to kind of get a feel for who's in the audience. Within the next second or so, you should see a question that pops up that just asks you to describe where you're coming from, what kind of company you work for. That will be very helpful for us to identify the mix of folks that we have here and do our best to sort of steer our discussion accordingly. So maybe in just a minute, we'll close that out and I'll share sort of some headline numbers on who we've got in the audience. And then the last thing I'll say is what I want to do is kick this thing off with just a few minutes of context. For those who don't know me, my name is Chris Kane. I lead a consultancy called Digiday Media. We study very closely the programmatic supply chain. And so I want to share just a few slides to do 2 things. One is to sort of give us a common language for this discussion. And 2 is to tee up just one really important theme that I think we'll touch on several times throughout this discussion. So I'll go to that in just a minute, but why don't we close out this poll and I can sort of read back what the mix of the audience is. Is there a good way to see the results? There we go. All right, well, you've come to the right discussion. We've got mostly publishers here, and we've got a surprising amount of other. I'm not sure what to make of that, but this is going to be a very sell-side oriented discussion. Hopefully for the buy side among us in this group, you'll get some value here. But we'll really steer this conversation as planned to actionable things that publishers of a variety of shapes and sizes can be doing to both manage short-term yield and sort of prepare for the long-term and an environment that's changing very, very rapidly. Let's start with a few slides, as I said. The basic shape of non-search digital advertising is something that at Jounce we track really closely. This is a diagram drawn to scale that shows the amount of dollars, marketing dollars, that will be spent in different regions of non-search digital advertising in 2021. And our focus, of course, for this discussion is the very center bubble here, which is the open internet. But the open internet has some very important intersection points with walled gardens. To very briefly make our way through that, let's start with the thing that we call the Google internet. The Google internet is about $25 billion of YouTube plus $25 billion of open internet advertising. And to state something that I imagine is very familiar to everybody here, if a marketer wants to buy advertising on YouTube, there's only one way to do it, which is to use Google's buying tools. Definitionally, that makes YouTube a walled garden. It is a media property that is traded programmatically, but that can only be accessed through buying tools that are controlled by the media owner. As we make our way around this diagram clockwise, there's a very similar story for Facebook. Facebook and Instagram operate as walled gardens. Facebook Audience Network is a mechanism for Facebook's advertisers to participate in auctions on the open internet. Amazon has a very similar shape to their business. There's a huge owned and operated pool of supply across web app and CTV inventory controlled by Amazon, which operates as a walled garden. And then Amazon's got a very significant DSP that enables their buyers to access open internet supply. And I won't talk these through one at a time, but there's a lot of other smaller walled gardens, we call them the challenger gardens, who are adopting a very similar playbook to Google, Facebook, and Amazon in that they operate a closed bidding system for their owned and operated supply, and they also operate a bidding system that sends their demand to the open internet. The reason all of this matters is that out in the open internet, media companies are both competing with these walled gardens and are highly dependent on these walled gardens as a critical source of demand. And so all in, the open internet is this extremely fragmented category where we've got about 60 to $65 billion of annual global ad spend, but that's distributed across 1.5 million properties, 1 million websites, 500,000 mobile apps, and 50,000 CTV properties. And we're going to talk about what it takes to be a successful media company on the open internet today. A simplifying framework that I think may be useful in today's discussion is what we view as sort of the 4 main revenue channels for ad-supported open internet media companies, whether we're talking about the web or mobile app or CTV category. We think the framework is basically the same. Publishers make money through hand-sold demand. Now, this might be a traditional reservation where the advertiser sells an insertion order directly to an agency or to a brand and books that campaign in its ad server, or increasingly it might be facilitated through programmatic pipes, like a programmatic guarantee or a private marketplace. But hand-sold demand means there's a direct relationship between the publisher and the marketer. And of course, there's exceptions here, but generally this is the most strategically attractive demand for a publisher because it's more predictable and because it tends to be higher margin. The cost of the supply chain is either zero or much lower here, creating a more attractive net payout of the marketer's budget to the publisher. But for the average publisher, hand-sold demand only gets you so far. And so next, there's Google demand. And there's nothing structurally unique about Google, but it's just so large. Such a huge pool, such a huge pool of demand for open internet media companies that in our experience, most publishers really do think of that as a standalone line item. All this demand that comes from advertisers, the millions of them who buy through Google Ads and Google DV360, represents a very significant portion of revenue for the typical publisher, particularly on the web. And then there's all of the other sources of programmatic demand. This is demand that comes from ad networks, from ad exchanges, from DSPs that might be directly integrated with the publisher. This is also all of the rebroadcasting and reselling that happens through the complexities of the programmatic supply chain. Strategically, the purpose of this open auction demand is to put pressure on Google. It is to diversify the publisher's revenue and create as much pressure as possible for Google to pay market competitive prices for inventory that isn't pre-sold through hand-sold reservations. And then last, but really critical and likely something that we'll talk about quite a bit on today's discussion, is a totally separate pool of demand that we call outsourced demand. These are instances where a publisher assigns exclusive sales rights for some of its inventory to a third party. These agreements might be structured as a rev share. They might be structured as an RPM. But what defines them is that the publisher doesn't control the ad serving. Some third party has taken over full control for filling and monetizing some of the publisher's supply. Now, the degree to which these 4 different line items are relevant for each publisher, of course, is going to vary, and we'll talk about that in today's discussion. I think more than that, though, what we see over and over in our research is that there's this industry narrative that is accurate, but also misleading. The story, and I'm sort of guilty of this from some of the things I said at the beginning of this discussion, the story about the open internet is it is wildly fragmented. That is a true statement. There really are 1.5 million properties that are traded programmatically. But there's also a high degree of concentration of where programmatic spend actually flows. When we look at the largest open internet media property and the second largest and the third largest and so on, you don't have to go that far down the list to start to accumulate the large majority of programmatic advertising dollars. The 1,000 largest websites, mobile apps, and CTV apps capture more than 3/4 of programmatic spend. And what that means is there are things that the largest publisher or the 10th largest publisher can do that the 1,000th largest property just can't. And similarly, there are things that the 1,000th largest property can do that would be non-starters for property number 100,000. And I think that sort of sets the main context for today's discussion. We want to have a really thoughtful discussion about that recognizes that there is no one-size-fits-all answer for every publisher, and that depending upon the scale of your business, the geographical distribution of your business, the representation of your business across web versus mobile app versus CTV supply, there may just be very, very different monetization strategies that are optimal for each publishing business. And thankfully, we've got 6 companies here who individually and especially collectively have an amazing line of sight across a wide diversity of open internet media businesses. And so what I want to do now is introduce these 6 companies and the representatives from each of them, give them each just an opportunity to sort of introduce themselves and provide a little bit of context on what their companies do. And then we'll get into some discussion about ways that they can bring some perspective from the publishers that they work with that might be useful for this broader group. So Deborah, why don't we start with you? We've got Deborah Fleener from Adipex. Deborah, you're on mute.
Hello, everyone. It's great to be here. I'm very excited. I was telling the panelists earlier to be on such be together with such an impressive list of tech innovators in the industry. So I'm quite excited for our conversation over the next hour. I am the founder and president of Adipex. Adipex is a full service, full stack ad ops consultancy. So full service in that we really take a partner approach to working with our publishers. And as Chris was saying, there is no one size fits all solution. So we work hand in hand with our publishers, not only to create the starting solution, which is best for their particular site needs, but also to optimize on an ongoing basis to make sure that we are continuing to grow publisher revenues. And we're full stack, meaning we don't stop at just display. We run video and native, and we run across all platforms. So web, mobile, and in-app, and now recently CTV. So again, we started 9 years ago in a garage, as they say, and we've grown to represent several hundred publishers today and across dozens of verticals and upwards of 20 billion monthly impressions. And thanks to that experience and scale of testing ground, should we say, we've been developing over the years what we call our M4 tech suite, which is kind of the magic machine that got us here today on the Digiday panel with the other finalists for Best Publisher Platform. So happy to be here. Thanks everyone for coming and looking forward to our discussion.
Thanks, Deborah. Let's go to Anthony Gonzalez from Kinetics next.
Thanks, Chris. Hi, everyone. My name is Anthony Gonzalez, and I'm the Senior Vice President of Publisher Development at Kinetics. We are the leading full stack video player in the market, working with publishers of all sizes and many of the Comscore 100, such as Vox, MarketWatch, Reuters, Disney, the Associated Press on their video strategy. We provide publishers with a fully integrated video player, CMS, content creation tools, an ad server built for video, as well as demand, which is sourced from our sellers and our direct server-to-server integrations with leading DSPs, such as The Trade Desk.
Andy from Duration, why don't you go next?
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Andy Batkin. I'm the CEO of Duration Media. Our innovative ad tech VAS, or Viewability as a Service, which is a finalist in the Best Publisher Platform, is in the business of finding and mining only highly viewable ad impressions, which creates a very unique supply path that averages 85% plus viewability. We provide over 500 web publishers a substantial incremental income stream and a reliable source of additional highly viewable impressions that can be served to their high funnel clients directly or monetized programmatically through the Duration Media highly viewable marketplace. So think of us as an ad salesperson who has a proven track record to generate millions of dollars of incremental ad revenue without paying a salary. That's us.
Thanks, Andy. Let's go to Zach Dugo from Insticator next.
Be here with everybody. So I'm Zach Dugo, founder and CEO of Insticator, and we're the leader of engagement for publishers through interactive products. And we do that through building community through our commenting product, where we pull in lots of first-party data, email, and we're increasing time on site and pages per session, along with our content engagement units, which have trivia, polling, content recirculation, as well as full stack monetization with display and video monetization connecting into our products with publishers like Major League Baseball, Ancestry Group, and many others. And great to be here with everyone.
Marie from Piana, why don't you go next?
Hi, very nice to meet you all. My name is Marie. I am Managing Director of Global Accounts at Piano. We at Piano, we provide an end-to-end platform, software platform to help our publisher clients grow their reader revenue, but also, reader lifetime value as well. And we do that by firstly collecting first-party and even zero-party data along the way. And we use that data to improve or strengthen the ad inventory, but also serving personalization, personalized content and personalized experience to the readers along the way, and along the way garnering that very important first and zero party data as well. And when our publisher clients are ready, we help them launch the subscription business as well, so paid content strategy. And we do that using our software, but also we have a really strong strategic services with also billions and billions of data point for benchmarking data that we use to help our clients launch that subscription business as well. So essentially to help our clients monetize better and in a way revenue diversification that we are helping along the way as well. All of that underpinned by first party and zero party data that we collect.
Thanks, Marie. And then last, let's turn to Gordon from Sophie.io.
Yeah, and thank you everyone for joining us today. I'm Gordon Udall. I'm one of the founders and a vice president at Sophie.io, a startup launched out of the Globe and Mail in Canada, which is a publisher, but which has spent more or less the last decade investing very heavily in AI and ML technologies for prediction and optimization, including yield optimization, that can really drive value directly for publishers along a significant number of dimensions. And we are now introducing those technologies into the market to help publishers succeed in the service of kind of building a bigger, stronger ecosystem. I'm really looking forward to the conversation today, getting to learn more about the colleagues around me, as well as learning more about the problems and challenges you guys are facing.
All right, well, I hope you all feel the same way that I do, which is that this is really an amazing group from a wide diversity of companies who see the whole internet, who have amazing visibility across this diverse group of publishers wrestling with problems that range from ad operations to video monetization to audience data management. And so I think we've got the right group to provide some really good context on what's happening today in the industry and what publishers need to be thinking about to be prepared for what will be pretty foundational changes over the course of the next several years. I want to re-encourage the attendees here to use the Q&A session as we go, or use the Q&A box as we go. I've got a few prepared questions for this group. I'll direct one at each of these panelists, and we'll also keep an eye on the Q&A window, and we'll do my best to sort of feed in additional questions from the audience as we go. So to get us started, Deborah, why don't we go to you first? One of the things that I talked about in the opening is this notion of the concentration of spend on the open internet, and that you really can't think of the internet as this fragmented set of 1.5 million properties, but that you need to recognize that there's just very different shapes of businesses on the open internet. One of the things that falls out of that is that you get huge media companies that can make large overhead fixed costs in in-house teams and technology stacks, and that then the smallest media companies can't reasonably justify those same investments, and so turn to partners there. There's this thing in the middle of the market, though, that has always seemed a little tricky to me to navigate. Publishers that aren't the largest on the internet, but aren't the smallest either, and sort of wrestle with whether it makes sense for them to invest in building in-house expertise, or whether it makes sense for them to outsource yield management or other sorts of programmatic operations to a third party. You've got amazing experience seeing this through AdApex. Can you just talk a little bit about how you hear publishers think about that trade-off and how you'd recommend publishers think about making those sorts of in-house versus outsourcing decisions?
You're muted, Deborah. You're muted, Deborah.
Thank you again. All right, so to paint a sort of picture of the way we look at it, yes, the big publishers at the far end, they have the benefit of having mostly direct deals, and therefore they need an in-house team to interface with the advertisers and the agencies. And so I think at that level, it's not even a question. And programmatic oftentimes can even be an afterthought for them because they have so much of their inventory sold to the direct premium deals. As we start to move down the curve, there's kind of an inverse relationship, size to proportion of direct deals or programmatic. So as you start to move down, you have to really start to look at exactly what you said, Chris. You know, do we have the economies of scale? Do we have the resources to build the right tools and keep them running? I think the further we evolve in our industry, it feels like it's the faster it goes. I liken it to a high-speed car race. And I think the only way to win is to have the fastest car on the track and the team to drive it. So when you're at that crossroads where programmatic is an important part of your revenue stream, you have to really think about, do we have the economies of scale, efficiencies, and expertise to drive the fastest car on the track? And so I think there are certain things that you should look at to determine, are we going to build this in-house or are we going to outsource this? And I think there are two main areas. One is, first the technology and the innovations. In a fragmented, ever-evolving, super fast-paced industry, we all know, everyone on this call, we know how fast innovation goes. And it takes a big team to keep up with it, and it takes a lot of technological innovation. We have, over the course of the years, we have the fortune of having a big testing bed of hundreds of clients and different verticals and different users. And through that, we have that has really shortened our time to market with new technologies. So we've been able to introduce technologies, but some things that I think every publisher should have if they want to have a sophisticated programmatic stack is analytics. We have Matrix, so our M4 tech suite. Let me just tell you a little bit. There's Matrix, which is the analytics, and that's critical to be able to pull down the network dashboard data, normalize it, and watch your performance. Merlin is our header bidder wrapper. Everybody can have a pre-bid header bidder wrapper, but it needs to be packed with features. We have over 50 features that drive up site performance and drive up CPMs. We've recently introduced Magma, which is an on-page console. So you can see in real time what's happening, bidding dynamics, ad behavior, CMP functionalities, tracking down bad ads. And recently we've added, and I think this is really important for, we'll be talking about it with all of the email solutions coming up, but first party data is key. And identifiable traffic is the future proof to get you to the next side of the cookieless world. So we've introduced Magnify, which is a way for publishers to easily and seamlessly plug into the main identity solution providers out there. So these are technologies that even in our side, they require constant improvement and constant optimization. And a publisher needs to ask themselves, do we have this expertise in-house to do this, to build the fastest car? And then when it comes to powering and driving the fastest car, Formula One car needs a team. When I started at Apex 9 years ago, it was me and my DFP. Now we have many layers. We have our dedicated account management team. Behind them, we have the onboarding team, and we have the optimization team, and we have the troubleshooting team, and we have the testing team. And of course, we have our tech team, which is continually innovating. And we have compliance team, policy and compliance. And recently we've been building up our data and privacy team. So these are all skill sets that are required to run that winning car. And you need to make sure that you can satisfy those. And it's not just about, if you're looking to outsource, it's not just about the quantity in the team, really about the quality. A lot of companies have a set it and forget it approach. So they'll get you set up and then they're gone. And we know that doesn't work. We know it requires ongoing optimizations. And that's the same thing for an internal team. It's not going to be set it and forget it. It's never one size fits all. And what works today on your site, tomorrow might not, due to industry changes, traffic changes.
That point about the pace of change, I think, is sort of especially important here. That's really helpful context. Thank you. One thing I want to highlight that I should have mentioned in the opening is we will have breakout sessions. at the end of this discussion. So on the hour, we'll close this webinar and we'll have breakout sessions, one for each of these different companies. And so for those of you who want to go deeper with Deborah on exactly how Adipex thinks about providing that full suite of services to publishers, there'll be an opportunity to do that. For now, let's turn to Anthony at Kinetics. We'll talk about video here. The prevailing wisdom, I guess, in the industry is that video is a supply constrained market with super premium price points. And certainly there's some truth to that. I also hear increasingly discussion that there's this other video opportunity for publishers that might be incremental to the first one, which is about capturing budgets at much lower price points. And I hear publishers unsure of how real that opportunity is or how to think about balancing some super premium video that might clear at a $25 CPM with some lower quality video that might clear at a $5 CPM. Kinetics potentially has the best view into the state of demand for online video. And Anthony, it'd be great to just sort of get your perspective and any numbers you can share on, what really is the going rate for video, or what's the distribution of pricing on video, and what's the opportunity for publishers to potentially be monetizing multiple different video ad products within their media portfolios.
Sure. So look, when it comes to CPM, sound on is where the most premium ad dollars are, right? But click to play can limit reach. Autoplay sound on is intrusive, right? It's strategic to leverage both top of the article placements along with in-content executions that showcase a publisher's own content. It is important to note, though, what you brought up, that premium publishers can still garnish double-digit CPMs for in-content positions, right? What buyers are looking for, right, is relevance alongside the content that the user wanted to consume in highly viewable placements, right? So you can still combine those things with other executions. It's also, vital for buyers and readers alike that this dual approach is applied with more thought than just putting a video on every page, right? You really need to give it some more thought, utilizing contextual data to understand what the article is about, what content you as a publisher have available that you've created, and what combination is right for a buyer and reader are just as important as achieving scale for the sake of scale.
What's the,
sorry,
please keep going.
I was to say it's why we've heavily invested in both content creation and contextual tools for both editorial teams and buyers, right? We can provide a real understanding of the visuals in a video, not just, the subtitles or the article content on which the video appears. Before I go further, what was your point, Chris?
I was going to ask you about buyer behavior and whether you see programmatic, there's direct sold budgets, but focusing specifically on programmatic buyers, are you seeing much change or any increasing sophistication in how programmatic buyers think about participating in auctions, whether it's Kinetics auctions or other auctions in the publishers that you work with? Are you seeing any changes in the way that DSP buyers participate in those auctions?
Sure. I would say the one thing that's increasingly coming up is contextual feedback. Right. I think that's a combination of both just pure interest, right, in being able to align more closely with the audience, as well as, near-term and future thinking on the deprecation of the cookie. So we hear more about that in terms of like a trend.
Thanks, Anthony. Let's go to Andy over.
I was just going to finish up one more thing, if that was all right.
Sure. Yeah.
Thanks. Because you were talking about like how to balance that, right? And what I was going to say is, publishers should be focused on all aspects, kind of just like an investment portfolio. When running a revenue generating video business, there are four main cost components. There's the technology, the content creation, demand sourcing, both direct and programmatic, and ad ops, right? The execution of all of this. These are the areas where we focus our attention. Our team of 80 plus engineers continues to build tools for each of these teams so that they can be more successful across these strategies. Premium publishers can have great content, strong direct sales, and still have fill challenges because of communication problems between disconnected technologies, right? And this is why holistic solutions such as ours, where the player, the ad server, and the exchange are all built as one, working together is so important. So you must arm, right, your editorial, your ad ops, and your sales teams with these specific tools to enable their success and growth. Thank you.
Andy, let's talk about a very, I think, difficult topic for a lot of publishers to figure out how to manage, which is auto refresh. Here's my perspective, and then it'd be great to get yours. What I feel like I hear a lot from both publishers and from media buyers is that there is a hard to define appropriate boundary between what would be reasonably considered to be a truly incremental ad opportunity for a highly engaged page view where the publisher chooses to refresh the ads, and very aggressive, potentially sort of unreasonable rapid refreshing of ads in a way that really doesn't give the buyer the ad product that they expected to purchase. And so for publishers, what I think I hear is it's just hard to know where to strike the appropriate balance. This is something that Duration obviously thinks about a lot. Can you talk a little bit about, strategically how publishers could maybe think about defining what an appropriate refresh strategy is, and then also operationally how you sort of do that at scale?
Well, it's a great question, Chris. So we have the benefit of billions of impressions that we've served. Our data shows that a smart refresh or a ad replacement based on viewability and time on page yields the most consistent and best result for advertisers and publishers to reach their campaign KPIs. Refreshing non-viewable ads is a money grab for publishers with no benefits to advertisers, as viewability scores drop and publishers actually see CPMs drop, with each refresh. I heard the expression the other day, it's just a down escalator, for publishers. So the way we look at it is that fast and accurate real-time ad slot detection, real-time viewability measurement versus predictive models, or worse, auto refresh. Let me say that one more time. Real-time viewability measurement versus predictive models, or worse, using auto refresh is really problematic, right? So the real-time measurement, sponsorship exclusion capability, and efficient auction logic are all needed to add value for both advertisers and publishers. So I guess as we focus, your question really is more about best practices, I think, at the end there. So what VAS, or viewability as a service, does is that we identify viewable impressions in real time. We focus on below the fold impressions because as the user scrolls, it's that consumer engagement with the publisher's content that creates that viewable ad impression opportunity, and then creates what we call a digital ad pod, which is similar to TV, where the viewer sees 3 or 4 ads in one user session, all 85% plus viewable and sold at premium CPMs. And that's how we increase inventory by, on average, 49.6%. So if you're a publisher that has 1 billion impressions a month, we are going to find and mine and potentially monetize together with you an additional 496 billion highly viewable impressions. So let's talk about how that works. So using our VAS product, the incremental viewable ad can be monetized via the publisher's own instance of GAM to their direct demand, resulting in better overall viewability versus 50% on average viewability, and substantially reduce opportunity costs. Or that incremental viewable ad can be monetized by the publisher programmatically or within Duration Media's highly viewable marketplace at premium CPMs. Because we are only highly viewable, our average CPMs are 4 to 6x higher than the publisher's own programmatic, So we can add a substantial amount of yield. If a publisher is already refreshing based on viewability, duration media can actually just become a demand source. So I think that the best way to describe this is that VAS provides our publishers with an incremental income stream and a unique supply path that, as these new ads are offered to demand partners, remember that these didn't exist a nanosecond ago before we created them. And one of the things that we're proud of, Chris, is that your data, the Jounce Media data, shows that DSPs are attracted to this unique supply path, as Duration Media's demand score, one of the great products that you guys offer, is one of a handful of the top 1,000 sellers that index above 1.0. So a quick example of that is Cox Media, which is a client of ours. We provide 6.7% of their supply, but 13.9% of their demand. So simply put, it's better to play at the high end of the gene pool and create highly viewable ad impressions that are proven to be good for both buyer and seller.
Thanks, Andy. I should mostly be the guy asking questions here, but one thing I'll add in is whatever the right long-term strategy is, refreshed ads are under a microscope at the moment by the buy side. And there's a lot of thought that product managers and engineers at bidding systems are putting into thinking about how to separate out the value extracting kind of auto refresh from the truly incremental inventory that can be created.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to switch. For our next three questions, we're going to talk about audience data today, and audience data as it is going to evolve into the future. I want to start with Marie from Piano, and in particular, talk about the role of publisher first-party cookie-based data. It seems to me that the future of addressability is going to have many solutions that will need to sort of work together, and that one of those potential techniques is publisher-defined audiences, where publishers can more directly monetize their first-party audience data in the absence of third-party cookies available to programmatic buyers. So Marie, can you talk a little bit about the way that Piano works with publishers to manage first-party data? And then, beyond Piano specifically, can you give us a little guidance on what publishers need to do now to best position themselves for the future?
Sure. I think data is incredibly valuable thing. And we've had a lot of data coming out of the years, a lot of data sources. Now we're going to lose one valuable data source, which is the third-party, cookie-based data. And I think we are at that boiling point where, the regulators are issuing fines. For example, Google has been fined more than 8 billion in Europe so far, and it's still counting. And at the same time, browsers are blocking everything, all tracking, and third-party cookies dead now. Well, very soon. And consumers also, they are now much more aware of what advertisers and brands and publishers are doing, and they are demanding more respect for their privacy. And yet at the same time, according to the recent statistics, more than 90% of those consumers and readers are more than happy to share their data as long in exchange for a better experience. So there is that opportunity here. And we at Piano, we really believe that publishers are, they have that incredible power because they have that direct relationship with consumers and readers. And done well, the publishers can garner this really rich first-party data, and in turn, that will, hopefully create that publishers should be able to command a better share of the ad dollars in the market, but also, being able to talk to advertisers directly. We see publishers and advertisers, brands coming together through, let's say, data bunkers and data clean rooms to safely not even exchange, just two separate areas, and they are able to address the market and increase the addressability in the market as well. And I think that's where Piano comes in. not only do we collect the data, we are first and foremost, data-based company. We have a very strong analytics arm collecting our publishers' readers' data, and our clients activate based on that data. But also we have our end-to-end platform to actually engineer or nudge the readers along the way. But we do that based on value exchange. Why would readers give you your email address? We can ask for email address in exchange for really personally curated content that you may want to read or watch. Same thing with registration. For example, people who give email address and register, they are 10x more likely to even subscribe to your titles. So if we bear that value exchange in mind, you can garner that incredibly rich data that you can activate, and Piano can help activate that data, whether that be through our DMP, amplifying with a lookalike modeling, being able to find large pool of audience that you can address, but also, as I mentioned earlier, proposing that subscription along the way. And I think the trick is knowing your audience and being able to propose the right content and right propositions at the right time to the right audience.
So to just sort of extend that a step further, Zach, maybe I'll ask you to weigh in here, and Marie, certainly if you have other thoughts, please do jump in. The theme of publishers being able to sort of build richer and richer first-party audiences relative to what advertisers can do, that seems really clear. To me, at least, the details don't. There's a lot of competing ways that publishers might capture email addresses and then convert those into different IDs. And then there's a lot of uncertainty around, well, which of these IDs does the buy side actually want to consume? So Zach, maybe you can start, and Marie, as I said, please do jump in if you have other thoughts here. From what you see at Insticator, Zach, are there any metrics you can share? Do you have any read on sort of the best practices or the emerging winners for how publishers are tactically going about both sort of managing their own sort of proprietary user IDs and then sort of integrating those IDs with some industry standard IDs that might get shared with the buy side?
Yeah, happy to do that, Chris. I think first and foremost, one of the big challenges publishers need to address is how they're going to go ahead and collect as many email addresses and kind of create persistent identity. For publishers who have a really big brand name like the New York Times or something, that's really simple to ask them for an email login. For others, you've got to look for natural community building ways of doing that. That's one of the things we do at Insticator with our commenting product is pull people in vis-a-vis email address so they can be a part of that community. And create that identity. And so doing that in a way that feels natural to the end user, I think is really important. Or as Maria spoke a little bit about, that value exchange, that's something we look to do. In terms of IDs and monetization, I think publishers are going to consistently struggle right now because it's unclear. Okay, there's 40 different IDs out there between LiveRamp and ID5 and so on and so forth, which adds the most value. And each one adds an incremental amount of load to the page, right? And so you've got this ties in additionally with things like Core Web Vitals. So on one side, we're saying to publishers, hey, you need to pull in as much identity as possible. Cookies are going away. And the way that you can do that and have value for advertisers is vis-a-vis first-party data. And one of the ways we do that at Insticator is via trivia and polling answers and commenting and building identity. And the other we're saying to publishers is, but you have to be really fast, or Google is, because we're going to start to penalize you vis-a-vis Core Web Vitals. If you've got all these calls happening on your page and each one of these additional pieces of JavaScript is going to slow down your page. And so I think publishers kind of working with solutions that are more consolidated. So one of the things we look to do at Insticator is pull in and have all these IDs hosted for our publishing partners, as well as pulling in that email address, that ID, and handling the monetization. Doing that across less partners is going to be better. And that's just mainly because publishers also have to balance the speed element, and they're going to start to see that with Core Web Vitals and other pieces. And these are all tied in together. You can't just look at how are we going to monetize the best, because you'll hurt the publisher's SEO and traffic that they drive that way otherwise.
So one other trade-off that I think I see is when a publisher has the opportunity to capture, to create some sort of an email capture event or an authentication event, it can also create a whole bunch of friction into the user experience. I mean, I see this all the time where there's something I wanted to read, but then I didn't want to read it enough to create an account. Gordon, you think about this a lot through Global Mail and through Sophie.io's third-party publisher partners. I guess, can you start maybe big picture about just sort of strategically how a publisher thinks about that trade-off? And then also share some detail on how you can put some good machine learning and good math around making that optimal balance between the user experience and email capture?
Yep. I mean, it's no surprise, right? Like there are no publishers anywhere in any market on earth that isn't struggling with the idea of how to build a sustainable business and how to build a sustainable business in a world where there's a lot of things that are in flux, and sometimes there's a lot of tension in that dynamic. So if you think about sort of the artificial scarcity that comes with a paywall model and trying to balance sort of subscriber revenue and advertising revenue in a world where really you need to make as much as you can of both, or even in a pure kind of advertising play space, there's a significant amount of tension between trying to balance growth and loyalty, for example. Every time you grow the audience, well, you just cut down your loyalty measures, you cut down your ability to retarget because you only know that person on one. What Sophie technologies do are basically use AI, ML to help you actively manage those tensions in the business through predictive models, through optimization routines, through machine learning for paywalls, for example, that know when to give up. So we've had a lot of success with kind of moving away from kind of the traditional sort of like meter counts and time-based calendar limited models to moving towards deep learning models that on every page and every instance are making a really smart decision about whether to ask someone for information. Sometimes we're going to try to ask you for a credit card right away. And maybe even persistently, if we think someone has a high propensity to subscribe, we'll be pretty brutal about asking you to pay because we think you will. But the system's smart enough to know when to give up, to know when to let someone this is an advertising-based relationship, and to exploit that advertising-based relationship for as much revenue as possible without interrupting that user session. And then when you get into the sort of progressive disclosure cases, the really great thing about kind of that cutting edge of math you have access to today, the reinforcement learning type techniques that can find opportunities that people just can't make rules for, is we've gotten really good at asking for people to sign up for a free account, for a registration, for a newsletter-based experience that gives us an ability to do identification over time, that gives us more of a sustainable foundation for monetizing the audience at a much higher rate. Interestingly, on top of that, there's a whole bunch of other things that are related to that identity allows you to unlock. One of the things we kind of famously do is we do automated site curation. So at the Globe and Mail, we used to have a team of people who would curate the website. We don't have people curate any of our pages on any of our sites anymore. 99% of all of the promotional slots across all the pages of the website are programmed by Sophie autonomously. And as it programs those sites for different audiences, it has different objectives. For some audiences, it's really trying to monetize that ad revenue through recirculation and user interactions being available that will drive that revenue. For some users, we can optimize for subscriber acquisition, where the kind of experience we curate around you is really optimized towards that outcome. The interesting thing is behind the scenes, Sophie gives you a set of dials that basically allow you to control the revenue mix and to control the objectives that you're optimizing for. And I think that's really different than the way people tend to think about it, which is sort of like on a quarterly or annual basis, you get together in a strat planning session, and then you don't come back to it. And you have very little ability to kind of tune it or to find out if you were just off the mark. That's one of the great things about kind of like having access to the type of math that's possible in the world today, is that when you have a platform in place that can see those interactions, it can find opportunities that people just can't. And I think that's a lesson that not enough of the world has sort of started to understand yet. And I think it's going to open the door towards a lot of possibilities in the future.
We had two questions come in that I want to address before we move on here. Zach, I'll throw the first one to you, and Deborah, I think you're probably best positioned on the second one. Zach, the first one's just like a direct follow-up to a point you were making about, I'm going to not exactly use the same language you did, but publishers having to be thoughtful about user experience and page load times. And the question here, I'm going to rephrase just a little bit, is sort of like, is there some reasonable way to believe that while publishers are potentially going to be loading in a whole bunch of new client-side resources related to these new IDs, that they're also going to be able to get rid of all of these ID syncs between third-party cookies, and that we could actually see better page view experiences or user experiences in the absence of third-party cookies. What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think we're going to start to see a whole host of speed gains as it relates to this. You're going to see a whole host of, because the bidding is going to change as well, right? So on that first time user load where there is no identity, DSPs are naturally going to have a whole separate bid strategy because they're going to be like, I don't know who this user is. And naturally, that'll also provide an opportunity to have a better content experience or a better product experience. This is something we're already thinking about at Insticator, our trivia polling products and our commenting products, is that when you don't have that identity, okay, great, let's take advantage of that and leverage and have a better user experience in that first load. And then when identity comes into place, let's maximize this. So I think there's going to be some natural opportunities there because there's going to be a whole host of speed gains as a result. So yes, and I think to the earlier question you had there, Chris, just like which IDs and so on, that'll be a natural like give and take as new IDs are developed, and there'll be a little bit of whack-a-mole of publishers having to unfortunately go through testing out multiple IDs unless they partner with somebody like ourselves or other people on this panel who are already kind of running that process. I think that is one of the gains, by the way, for a publisher who uses somebody like Insticator or others, is that somebody who's working with many different publishers as opposed to a publisher spending that R&D effort to like find out that same thing that a partner already knows well can save them a lot of time and resources.
That also feels really consistent, I think, with Deborah, what you were saying before, that at the scale that Adipex operates, or any of these businesses operate, you can just sort of learn faster and stay closer to the edge of the industry than any individual publisher could. Sort of related to this point of, Adipex's view across lots of publishers, and maybe your personal seat that to my eye feels close to being a publisher, where you've got sort of a purview across the full set of monetization choices a publisher makes. One of the other questions that came in from the group that I'd love your opinion on, and others certainly are welcome to jump in here as well, is just at a basic level, if consumers understand the trade-offs that we're talking about here, trade-offs around ad load and taking advantage of a video opportunity and managing trade-offs between soliciting users to log in order to help do consumers understand that publishers are making these sorts of trade-offs to create the best consumer experience possible while also operating a profitable business?
That's a great question. I don't think that enough people out there realize that content has a very high price to create and that ads are paying for it. And I think there's been this backlash that, advertisers or publishers with ads on sites have become demons. But it is going to be up to the publishers. Publishers abuse the data. Advertisers followed people too severely. Whatever it was that made consumers turn against advertising is just going to require a re-education process. And as Marie was saying, it's about the value exchange. And Gordon, same thing, measuring where is the point. I remember the last time the sky fell, it was GDPR, and everyone said, no one's going to click consent. And then we just got used to it. So it's just a matter of education and getting people used to it, I think.
Yeah, just to chime in there, sorry, go ahead.
Or go ahead, Jeff.
I was just going to say, I think one of the unfortunate, casualties, and certainly I think all of us on this webinar feel that, is that consumers, when they think of advertising, often think of Google or they think of Facebook, and they think, F Google, they have all the money in the world, they don't care about me. And that's like a re-education process that I think publishers need to be more front and center. We need to be more front and center, that the ad ecosystem is not just Google, Facebook, and Amazon. And too often I think consumers then don't value that. They think of advertising, they think of, AdWords and AdSense. And so they don't value the publisher as much, and they don't really understand the ecosystem.
Hey, Chris, I really think that the issue is the quality of the ads. We used to joke that, dancing chickens running across the website, it was not a great user experience, and it gets back to that, that whole discussion of, refreshing and how do you do that? And we really think that if you put less ads on the page and you had a leaderboard at the top and maybe a 300 by 250, and these were sticky ads so that the user could engage in the content, and then those ads could be refresh based upon the viewability, there'd be a lot less clutter on the site, and I think the user experience would be better. So we're testing that right now, and I think that we're going to prove that less ads are going to be better.
I think the average user thinks that a publisher makes a lot more from them on advertising than they actually do. I mean, I'm sure we've all had this conversation with our friends. They think that like a publisher is making way more from them individually reading 3 articles a month than they would off a 99-cent subscription. So I don't think the general public has a full grasp on like the trade-off there. And I think
we could all do better work to address
yeah,
individual
I think like from subscription, yes, ad quality and page layout and all these things I think are very important, but so is community and affinity and wanting to make that personal transaction, I think more so than anything else.
All right, so there are some other questions that I wish we could get to, but we're not gonna have time for. I wanna take our last 3 minutes here to do a quick lightning round, and then I will share details on how any of the attendees can join some breakout rooms with each of these 6 panelists. So we'll go through these 3 questions, and for the group, we'll ask you to participate in some of them. So our first question, I'm just gonna go around the horn here, starting with Deborah. Ideally, sort of a one-word answer. For the typical publisher, knowing that no publisher is typical, but for the typical publisher, should the focus be building deeper relationships with fewer monetization partners? Or should the focus be diversifying your monetization strategy by integrating with more partners? So more partners or fewer partners? Deborah, you want to start? You're on mute.
Fewer, quality over quantity.
Anthony?
Fewer partners, more technology.
Andy?
Fewer.
Zach?
Fewer.
Oh, come on. No one's going to buck the trend. Marie?
Fewer and deeper, yes.
Gordon?
It's the same thing, but I worry that at the end of the day, you end up with homogeneity that isn't actually helpful to the industry. There is a real possibility of a race to the bottom in that scenario. So someone needs to explore. And if you have the capacity to explore, you got to look for a competitive advantage in that exploration. If you don't find it, move on.
All right, that was a good
Gordon,
answer.
you got to cheat by giving a one-word answer.
It was a good answer.
I think that's the answer we all wanted to give.
All right, so we missed the poll on that one. Let's try to poll the audience on this second one. When will Chrome entirely disable support for third-party cookies? Let's do in the same order here. Deborah, you want to start?
Late 2022.
Anthony?
Q4 2022 to Q1 2023.
Andy?
I agree with Anthony.
Zach?
Yeah, I think late 2022.
Marie?
Oh, I think it will come much earlier, early 2022.
And Gordon?
And go late 2022 as well.
Okay. Our last question, late 2022 seems to be the consensus here. All right, last question we won't share with the audience, but I will ask each of the panelists to go around the horn. You all knew a bunch about each other's businesses before today. You probably, hopefully know more now. You cannot vote for yourself, but if you voted for one of the 5 other panelists, who among this group do you think is most deserving of Digiday's Best Publisher Platform Award? Deborah, you want to start?
Can I just vote for Jones? Because I like everyone on the call. I heard a lot of great things. No, I guess not. I'm going to vote for Sophie because I'm really intrigued and think AI is going to be a critical part of mapping and navigating our future.
Anthony?
I'm going to agree. I'm going to go with Sophie. I think the dynamic capabilities both on web and print and how they're using data is interesting.
Andy?
I'm going to say a tie between Kinetics and Adipex.
Zach?
I'm going to go with Piano, not just because I'm friends with Trevor, but I think their solution is doing some really interesting stuff.
Marie?
I can't possibly choose one amongst all of us. All of us, I think we deserve. I think I'm very impressed by the panelists, and I've learned a lot today. So I wish we can all win.
I respect your diplomacy. Gordon?
Over the course of getting to know the panelists here, I like Duration Media's problem set. I like the things that they can learn. I like how solvable that problem is. So that to me is like, it's a nice, clean, interesting value proposition in the market. And I'd be curious to see what they do.
Great. Well, we're at time. I appreciate all of you making some time. I'll pull up on screen here links to each of our websites in case folks in the audience want to learn more. We'll also put into the chat window right now links where each of these 6 panelists will be available for the next several minutes to just have an open conversation with anybody in the audience who wants to ask follow-on questions or go deeper into what their products can do. We'll maybe stay on the line here just for another 2 or 3 minutes so that chat window doesn't go away, but we'll end the webinar here. I really appreciate all 6 of our panelists spending the hour with us. I really appreciate all the attendees joining, and I hope you found some value and some actionable next steps that you can take.
Great. Thank you, Chris.
Thanks,
everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. It's been
Thank
fun.
you.